Okay. All right, well, no attendees on yet. That's, well, here we go. We get some people. All right, for those that are getting on, we do hold our presentation for the first couple of minutes while we wait for everyone to get on. I know there's been some technical issues that folks have had in the past with logging on, or they're finishing up a call. So we wait for a couple of minutes to let everybody get in. So as you come in, just hang tight and we'll get this program started here in a couple of minutes. I see somebody else has joined us. Just please hang tight for a minute as we wait for a few minutes for everybody to get on that's, you know, either having some technical issues, which we've had in the past, or just having their own technical issues, or simply just kind of getting here after finishing up a call. So just hang on tight, give us a few minutes, and then we'll get started.
They're grabbing snacks. They're popcorn.
Yeah. Well, Daryl, you know, I'm gonna get this things kicked off, and then, you know, I'm gonna take a look at I'm gonna mute myself for just a moment. I'm gonna check the back end, because I know we have a lot more people that have registered for this than are on right now. So that tells me that we're having some sort of perhaps technical issue with our GoToMeeting platform. So let me do the introductions and then we'll get moving. But for those that are there, just kind of remain on hold. You're gonna be in listen only mode anyway. We're gonna get started and moving forward. All of this is gonna be available at the end. We're recording and we'll be distributing out that recording to everybody that attends and also that is unable to attend. They'll get a copy of it. So yeah, with that, let's just kind of get moving. So, you know, thank you again for joining us today. It's a Terra Third Thursday webinar. For those of you that regularly join our sessions, and for those of you who are new, these sessions are really designed to be brief. They're designed to be providing you with useful information that you can use to enhance your knowledge, your operations, and your bottom line. Today, we are pleased to welcome Daryl Kendall, the Executive Director of RIOS, as our host this month. He's going to be discussing the unsung hero of electronics certification, the management system. I'm going to be helping him along with that, just kind of riding sidecar with him while he's giving his presentation, asking some questions that I find relevant, as well as looking and checking our chat feature and our questions feature that should be in the right side of your control panel, where I'll be able to ask any questions that you all bring to the table. And before I turn it over to him, though, do have a couple of just quick announcements from Terra, just to keep you up with, you know, things happening here at the Alliance. If you missed it, you know, I want to encourage you to join us perhaps in the future as we have our Terra second Thursday marketing and interactive hour. So we had many of our folks getting together where instead of being in listen only mode like we are today, our members actually had the opportunity to talk with each other, and when they were discussing marketing topics. And this last one was about, you know, how do you as an organization monetize your marketing? How do you put a dollar figure on some of the things that you do, with whether that's a press release or some other activities? A really good conversation. You know, people with similar kind of difficulties and experiences kind of sharing their best practices was a really good session. So you'll see more about that as we schedule our next one, and I would encourage everybody to join it. We're going to be attending as an organization and hosting a portion of the eReuse conference in November in Denver. So as an organization, we still are providing, there's a $50 discount for attendees that we have a special promo code for. If you're interested, please contact us about us. We'll give that to you so you can get signed up for that. That'll be a great opportunity for our Terra members to get together really for the first time in a hospitality room to get to know each other a little bit better. You know, COVID unfortunately has kept us from doing that. It's been something that's been on our want to do list, a high want to do list for a long time. We're finally getting that chance. And the last item here is just to welcome some new members we've had since our last session. Gem Southwest, URT, and Chupan Asset Management have all joined us, all folks that we had an opportunity to meet at our last conference at the eScrap conference. And we're expecting to get a couple more in here before our next session. So as I mentioned, if you have any questions during this, please use the chat feature, use the questions feature. I'll be monitoring it, and we'll ask those questions as we go throughout the presentation. Today we've got scheduled, it's a total of 45 minutes from 3 o'clock to 3:45. So we're gonna get moving. And as I mentioned, we've got today as our host, Daryl Kendall, the Executive Director of RIOS. And for nearly a decade, Daryl has served as the Executive Director of RIOS. Under his leadership, RIOS has become the go-to quality, environmental, and health and safety management system for the recycling industry across North America. When he started, or when he's not out helping, recycling facilities improve their QEH&S performance, he can be found hanging around with cows and growing vegetables on his 128-acre farm. And like me, you can also find him with his, you'll see that he's got a Cleveland Browns helmet behind him. He's a long-suffering Cleveland Guardians fan, just like I am. So we're both commiserating our recent loss. So with that intro, again, Daryl, I'm going to turn this over to you. I'm going to check the back end to see if there's any technical issues, and I'll join you in just a moment.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Steve. And I'm going to apologize in advance. The best laid plans of mice and men, right? My wife and I had arranged for her to pick up the kids from school today, and then they had a little emergency at work, so they came home on the bus, and so we're sort of if you hear some sounds in the background, it's them, and we'll just manage it, and I apologize in advance for that. But thank you all for joining. I'm really excited to have an opportunity to talk to everybody and be part of the Terra Third Thursday program and talk about RIOS and the value of the management system. And when Steve approached me about doing this, this really felt like the obvious topic, right? A lot of times facilities and companies make the decision to pursue either R2 or E-stewards because customers are demanding it, which is obviously a great reason to do it. And as you go through the process, you either hire a consultant or you get advice from others, and they go, okay, are you going to do R2 or E-stewards? You make that decision, and then it's like, oh, by the way, you have to get this other certification as well. And that mindset kind of carries out through the entire implementation. And we find that a lot of times, not necessarily in the first year, it's usually in the second year, we find that a lot of times what happens is a management system component falls off, and the focus is taken away from the management system component in favor of the requirements that are part of the R2 and E-steward certification. And it beyond being the executive director of RIOS, which is a management system, I see huge opportunity for businesses to develop their environmental health and safety and quality programs and take them to the next level, to sort of ramp them up using the management system. And they're missing that opportunity because it gets, as I said, it gets overlooked. So I want to talk today about what you can do to make sure that your management system is a core component of your certification portfolio, and the ways you can leverage your certification, your management system certification, to benefit your business in ways that maybe are significantly different than your R2 and E-stewards certifications. So with that, let's see, here we go. So today we're going to talk about, as I said, the untapped value of the management system. We're going to talk about why it's important and why you should really sort of refocus your lens a little bit and make sure that your management system is at the very least on equal ground with the requirements of the others. What you can do to improve your management system over time and therefore improve your business, and why it should matter to you. So those are sort of the three ways we're going to look at this issue today. So what is the management system? And I recognize this is a weird position for me because this is an audience of people who are involved in certification and have a background in certification. Usually I'm And so in some ways I'm preaching to the choir, I hope. But usually I'm in a room full of people who are like, oh, I was told I have to get certification, or my boss tapped me to implement our certification programs, and I don't know what I'm doing. Can you start from the beginning? So I'm going to do a little bit of starting from the beginning, but I promise we're going to get a little bit higher level real quick. So what is the management system? It's your RIOS or your ISO 14001, 9001, 45001. All of those are considered management system. There's systems. They're programs that are designed to help you improve your performance in either health and safety, environmental, or quality, or in the case of RIOS, all of them. And that's the big difference between RIOS and ISO as you look at your options, right? And we're going to talk about in just a minute what that looks like. But RIOS was designed for recyclers by recyclers to address, many of the issues of compliance and health and safety and things like that that recyclers were facing. And so it is very specific to the recycling, refurbish, repair industry. And as we went through the process of rewriting the standard in 2016, we really did take into account the electronic side of it, where, some of you may be dismantling and sending commodity grade material downstream for recycling. Some of you may be in the ITAD space, and so you've got a whole component of bringing in material, understanding where it falls with regard to your tech cut line. Some of you may be a repair facility, and so we took that into account as we wrote the new standard to make sure that it applied across the board. But the other big difference is that it integrates environmental health and safety and quality. So it's a really 3-in-1 standard when compared to those 3 ISOs. There are other sort of management systems out there. ISO really covers a wide range. There's data security. There's a data security management system. There's like accounting best practices management system, stuff like that. But for the purposes of our industry, really, these are the 3 that we'll focus on, and really the most prevalent across our industry. And it doesn't matter whether you're doing R2 or e-stewards, both of them have a requirement for a baseline sort of foundational management system on which you build everything else, right? So R2 says everybody has to have an EH&S management system, a certified EH&S management system, and that can be RIOS or ISO, right? And so the EH&S portion, right, under ISO would require 14 and 45. But for most of you, if you're doing R2V3, you're finding, especially if you're going through it right now, you're finding that if you do any refurb, resale, reuse type stuff, you're going to have a 9001 requirement as well. So you're either going to have 3 standards or 1 standard. And I'm simplifying that. That's obviously a sales point for RIOS. But it really does make things a little bit easier as we integrate it. So instead of having a whole bunch of stuff to juggle, you're sort of looking at everything through one lens. E-stewards, on the other hand, we actually just really sort of solidified our partnership with e-stewards, and we're written into e-stewards 4.1. E-stewards has always had a 14001 requirement, at least as far back as I can remember. Maybe the first edition didn't, and it got added later. But I think it's been in since the beginning. But under e-stewards 4.1, they gave an allowance for RIOS in place of 14001. And in our conversations with Jim and Prema and everybody over there, obviously the health and safety component, it's no secret Jim is very concerned about health and safety for workers and for those that are receiving material on the downstream side. And so it seemed like a logical step to have a more robust health and safety program that comes with RIOS, right? So it worked out for everyone, and we're really excited to be part of all of the standards. Whether you go R2 or e-stewards, RIOS is there, and that's exciting for us. So usually the management system is implemented, audited, certified at the same time as your electronic certification. And so, as I said in the beginning, it gets overlooked because you call a consultant a lot of times. I think probably 80%, particularly in the electronic space, 80% plus are using a consultant. So you call them and say, hey, I need to get R2, I need to get e-stewards, and they go, oh, well, you also need to get ISO or RIOS, and we'll do that all at the same time. And it just sort of starts off with that sort of back burner mindset, and so we want to change that today. The other thing about a management system is it's not prescriptive. So unlike e-stewards and R2, which have very clear requirements around this is how you have to, focus material management plan. The following things must be handled in this way and followed to end of life in this way, right? RIOS and ISO as management systems are not like that. It's sort of, I put in here, do what you do, but understand and mitigate the risk, right? So we don't really care what your process is, as long as you're doing it in a way that is mitigating any health and safety, environmental, and quality risk to the fullest extent possible, right? So you're going to look at your operation and say, what risks do I have here, and how do I control for those? So we're not really changing what you do or dictating what you do. We're just asking that you do it in a way that is introducing as little risk as possible.
So, that's really, interesting that, it's great that the certifications, and we're all about, each stewards and R2,
Yeah.
that they require this. But, good business practices really dictate that, you've got to take care of your employees first. So is this something that, and you mentioned, a lot of the consultants you work with are doing, pointing people in one direction or another. Is RIOS, a certification that folks could tackle without having to bring in a consultant, or kind of what's kind of a best practice there?
Yeah, great question. So we designed RIOS initially when we ran with it to be a DIY or do a DIY management system. It wasn't even initially designed to be a certification. It became that later, out of some folks said, well, if we're going to do this, we might as well get credit for it, right? And that's how it became a certification. But it was designed to be DIY, and there was this thing called the RIOS implementation guide, the RIG, and the first version of it was challenging. It was written by very, very smart people, and when you read it, I at least felt like a very, very dumb person, right? It was just very tough to grasp, right? So when we rewrote the standard in 2016, one of the things that I said very early on was, the standard is going to have very technical language. All of the guidance document, the implementation guide, all of that should be designed so that somebody without a background in management systems can implement this, right? And so as you go through, the implementation guide, there's a chapter for every single requirement within RIOS, and that it breaks it down and says, why are we asking you to do this? What does it look like when it's done? What are the things you can do to get yourself in a pickle with this? What are the best practices? And here are some tools you can use to implement this, right? And it goes so far as to even give some examples, depending on certain operations and things like that. So it really is designed to be a DIY system. And we often encourage, particularly fledgling companies that are just starting out, or small companies that are like, I can't really afford to do a full R2V3 or a full e-stewards right now, but we need to do something, right? We need to get our health and safety, environmental stuff under control. We need to start taking those steps. It's an easy first step to start tackling a few of the requirements and start understanding the risk first, and then mitigating the risk and stuff like that. So if there's anybody out there that's like, oh, hey, this R2 or e-steward stuff is really expensive, and just for our budget is just probably not doable right now, the RIOS is potentially a good first step, because it is designed ultimately to be a DIY sort of program. So.
Your little one's poking in?
What was that?
Is your little one's made it?
The way my screens are set up, I can't see the little arrows to skip forward, and for some reason my arrows, so I have to like peek around the corner of my screen. The kids are actually being very quiet and very compliant, so I'm actually worried about what they're tearing up in there, but it'll be all right. Nothing we can't undo. So all right, so let's talk about why a management system is required, right? So why do R2 and RIOS have these management systems in there? Why is it just it's like a Chinese torture device, right? An ancient Chinese torture device. It's not, I promise. There is good value to it. It serves as a foundation of your certifications, right? So things like document control, communication procedures, risks and impacts assessments, all of that stuff are all things that build up or support all of the requirements of R2 and e-stewards. So if you think about the stuff that R2 and e-stewards are requiring you to do, all of them are going to look like and act like a written policy or procedure, right? Which is built on, which is it, all of those. It's going to sound crazy. The procedure for writing a procedure or a policy is all
Right.
defined as part of your management system, right? And so that's why when I say it's the foundation, it really does set everything up. And so as you go through, managing your records, and as you make sure that you've got the correct version of your work instructions and things like that that are required for R2 and e-stewards, all of that is based on the foundation that is your management system. It also provides a baseline for your environmental health and safety and quality performance, right? So, I have had the opportunity to probably be in a couple hundred recycling facilities around the globe through my 10 years with RIOS, and we've seen a very wide range of performance in the areas of environmental health and safety and quality. And so having the management system really does provide you a baseline. It doesn't necessarily guarantee, or it doesn't by extension mean that you're going to be a high level performer in those areas, but it gives you the opportunity through continuous improvement to start at a certain level and end up being a high performer, right? And that's our goal, and we're monitoring and measuring that as part of the system. And so and really, when you get to the point that you're adding an R2 or an e-stewards on top of a management system, you can't be winging it, right? And we'll talk about that in just a minute. You really have to have things nailed down and under control. Otherwise, it's going to spiral out of control real quick, and you're going to have a real fun audit at the end of the year. So the other thing is it provides uniformity across the industry. RIOS is not just for electronics recycling; it's for recyclers of all commodities, right? Ferrous, non-ferrous metals, tire and rubber, paper, plastics, electronics, and our goal really is that RIOS is the baseline standard for the entire industry at some point, and we're moving in that direction. We've seen huge growth in those other commodities in the last 2 years or so, and so it does have that function as well.
And to see, and it's what's a good thing, and what kind of drew me into wanting to invite you here to do this presentation for us, is that we're starting to see a lot more potential collaboration, even within the electronics industry. The kind of the anger and the guns and the wall between R2 and e-stewards is starting to soften a little bit. And I think it's organizations like RIOS who are reaching across to trying to make some partnerships happen, are part of that. So it's great to see how the work that you've been putting in over these last 10 years, which Israel's been putting in over the last 10 years, even what e-stewards and R2 are putting in, are starting to build some more positive partnerships in this industry.
Yeah, and ultimately all of our goals, right? Whether it's Isri and Robin and her team, or Jim and his team at e-stewards, or Corey and his team at R2, or the work we're doing, all of us have the same mission, which is to create an environment in an industry where healthy, safe, and responsible recycling is absolutely the bare minimum that we accept, right? And for all of you that are here and participating in this webinar, by the very nature that you're participating in certification, understand the impact that bad actors have on the industry. And so our goal is to raise the bar and set a level of expectation across all commodities in recycling that says, look, there are hazards in the industry. That doesn't mean it's a dangerous industry. There are potentials for negative environmental impact. That doesn't mean we are a negative contributor to the environment in all of our communities, right? And so we're all working together. And frankly, at this point, the fights that we have across the industry are too big to be trying to fight, a two-front war, right? And so it's important that the e-stewards community, and Jim and I have had this conversation. The e-stewards community, the ISRI community, which are really sort of those were the dividing lines, right? We're starting to see everybody sort of soften those lines and come together, and we're really excited about that because Basel is trying to make things, the new Basel Convention rules are making things difficult. environmental justice, which I'll talk about here in a second, is making things difficult. And these are all important issues, right? But we have to fight them together for the good of the industry, right? And so
Yeah.
it's
A
a
lot
good
of focus
opportunity.
on the negatives, but that's where not too many people focusing on the positive. That's where we want to fill that
That's right.
role. So
That's right. So, so what can your management system do for you, right? And there's the obvious stuff, right? It just basically improve your health and safety, environmental performance. We've talked about that. So I focused on a couple of other things here that I think are often overlooked. And one of them, particularly right now, everybody, I think if we were able to ask for a show of hands, all of your hands would go up. How many people are having a problem finding and keeping employees? One of the things that has been proven across not the recycling industry specifically, but across all industries, is that where you have a health and safety management system and you've got buy-in from your employees as part of that, right? So they understand what that system is, why it works, and you're asking the question like, do you feel safe in the work you're doing? Do you have a noise issue where you work? You're really making them feel like part of the process. The employee retention is like 33 or 40% higher, I think is the statistic. Don't quote me on that. It's been a while since I pulled it up. But, employees have time and time again have shown that they will take less pay for a safer work environment, right? If they don't feel safe, they'll take a pay cut in order to feel safe, right? They want to go home. That's the bottom line. And so, that's a big benefit of having, your management system operating at a high level and doing what it's supposed to. The other one is streamlining compliance. And this was why RIOS was created in the first place, is recyclers got together and said, you know what, it's really, really hard to keep up with all the changing regulations from the EPA, from OSHA, from the state. I put on here, wing and a prayer is not a sustainable strategy. I so often get calls from people that are like, hey, I need to solve a problem. And, you ask, okay, well, what's that problem? Oh, we had a very significant near miss yesterday, or we had an incident yesterday, or we had an OSHA inspector in here yesterday, and we're going to get nailed with a heavy fine because we didn't do X, Y, and Z, right? And so just really getting your ducks in a row and having a system, being able to monitor all of these, first of all, understand what you're required to do, but then make sure you're complying with it.
mhm.
I mentioned regulators. I've got story after story of regulators that have come into a facility because an angry worker, OSHA, an angry worker left and said, "Oh my gosh, I thought, I thought I was gonna die every day when I went to work." And the OSHA inspector comes in and, the facility pulls out their management system and their work procedures and their policies, and it changes the tone, and OSHA ends up leaving without any fines, and we all know how that. And I've got plenty of stories, and if you come to any industry events, I'll undoubtedly make one of those stories. One of those people tell their stories on a stage somewhere. So ERC, I'll put my plug in for ERC. It's one of the best conferences we go to. So if you haven't signed up for it, go to it so you can hang out with Tara, but it's also going to be a huge benefit for your business. So I'll give you that plug. And also, the management system eliminates your reliance on one person to show up. It's the hit by the bus rule. What happens if your EH&S manager gets hit by a bus tomorrow? How many of you know where to find your lockout tagout procedure for your baler, right? Because we all know if your EH&S manager decides to call up tomorrow and say, I ain't coming to work today, the OSHA inspector's coming right behind them, because that's just the way life works, right? They never come when you got a full staff and you're ready to see them, right? So what happens on that day, right? Is everything in order? Do you have everything set and ready to go, or are you going to be panicked and digging through piles and piles and piles of material? So,
Right.
um,
And
and
in this industry too, I mean, it's like any industry, but these guys in particular, it's like, if you haven't had a battery fire yet, just wait.
yeah,
You're going to.
yeah. I mean, at eScrap, I was on a nice long 3.5 hour battery panel where we talked about emergency management. Tee this up, right? As my last point.
Mhm.
Batteries are an if not or a when not if, right? You're going to have a thermal event related to a battery. If you're in the electronics space, really, if you're in any commodity at this point in recycling, I mean, paper has it because, the kids' books, when you press or greeting cards, when you open them up and they sing to you, right, there's a battery in there. And what happens when you get a pile of shredded paper and there's a battery that starts heating up? That's, we call that a bad day for a lot of people,
Yeah.
right? And so it's an issue across the industry. And so having a management system, again, I often use the example of if you have a fire at your facility and there's black smoke coming up everywhere, and the news shows up and has a microphone, their goal is to put it in front of the face of anybody that'll talk. Your goal is to have your staff trained and disciplined and have expectations of them to know who talks to the media, who doesn't talk to the media, where they go, what's their muster point, who we call to ensure there's no environmental runoff or any runoff that'll create an environmental issue. So in the case of emergency management, it's all about having that discipline, because what you don't want is somebody getting real excited and getting in front of a microphone and say, "Oh yeah, I thought I was gonna die. I called my wife. I told her I love her. This was the end." And it just doesn't end well for anybody that way, right? And
No.
I sort of joke about. I use that as sort of the story, but you really want to make sure your employees know where to be and what to do, and the management system is the key, right? The really make sure you've got a communication strategy, and make sure you have you've done your drills, you've done your training, your employees are prepared, so that way you can keep them using their logical portion of their brain instead of their fight or flight mechanism. So
Right. It's just that, the ounce of prevention. I mean, when these companies that are certified stewards in R2, our membership, they spend thousands of dollars to achieve that. It costs thousands of dollars on a daily basis to maintain it. And you don't want something, an accident or something to, completely erode all of that goodwill that you built up to achieve all these, great wins by, falling prey to something like that.
absolutely, and it's the little stuff, right? And George Hinkle from Arcoa is currently the chairman of the board of directors of RIOS. And he has a really great story about, you go through these trainings, you feel like nobody's watching or nobody's listening and nobody's paying attention until you have an incident. And they had an incident, somebody cut their hand or whatever. And so it was a pretty nasty cut. They were fine ultimately in the end. But he walked back there and as they were going through the cleanup, right, they all had on, the bloodborne pathogen kit. They were all doing it exactly by the book as they were trained. And he's like, you really underestimate the value of those trainings until you see them actually sort of pay off in the end. And so, again, a wing and a prayer is not a sustainable model, right? What the management system does is help you schedule that out, make sure you're covering everything, make sure you're reviewing it. And I'm watching the time as well, Steve. I know we've got 12 minutes left, and I got a couple more slides to get through, so I'm trying to do that. But that's really the value, again, is just having you prepared for that.
Right.
So how do you maximize the value of your management system? The first thing is make it yours, right? Operating under a management system is a culture change for any facility. I don't care how good your written procedures were before you started a management system. Having that management system work in a robust way is a culture change for a lot of people, right? It requires people to be more detail oriented, to follow procedures where they may have in the past just said, well, I know how to do this, I can do it, right? But the more that you make it part of your culture, the better off you'll be. And a lot of times we talked about consultants, and this is not a knock on consultants. I don't want you to hear, what I don't want you to hear is, oh, consultants don't do a good job, right? What happens is a lot of times consultants come in and you put them on a time constraint. You said, this customer needs me to have my certification in 6 months. And so they go, okay, great, let's go. And they implement the portions of your management system based on your operations like they think they should be, right? But the key is you really need to make sure that your management system and your risk assessments and your policies and procedures, your work instructions are written for your facility. So as you go through, make those tweaks, right? Don't be afraid to change it. The purpose of the management system is to improve over time. So if you see something that can be better, make sure you do that. And as I said, review it often. Internal audits are great. There's nothing, everybody knows an internal audit's coming. A spot check is even better, right? Just walking through the facility and saying, hey, hey, Bob, where's the SDS sheet for this chemical you're using, right? If that got in your eye, what's the first aid for that? Well, I don't know. Let's look at the SDS sheet. Where's that? I don't know. Well, that's a failure in your system, right? So having those spot checks really can help, and that can come from the management rep, that can come from senior management, that can come from whoever, but just check it on occasion, right? Make it sort of a fun game with your staff. And the other thing is, and this one is so underrated. Bob McCarthy, I remember my first e-scrap, Bob McCarthy was working for Green Eye Partners, and I sat in on a session where he was talking about selling your certification, and it changed my mindset on this completely from day one, right? Train your sales team on what your certifications are. I'm not just talking about the management system. The management system is important. The R2, make sure they understand what your R2 and eSteward stuff are. But the management system stuff is really important because your customers and your suppliers all have it, right? If you're selling steel downstream, or ferrous metals downstream, even non-ferrous metals downstream to a foundry or a mill or whoever, they have a management system in place. If you're getting equipment from a Fortune 500 company, they may not have ISO, but I can guarantee you they're operating with a management system, some sort of management system in place. They value this stuff. They understand that it works. Your insurance company, right? Sell it to your insurance agent. They monetize risk. If you can articulate how you're managing the risk that's in your facility, they hear recycling and they go ding, 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 ding. You just like you hear the Las Vegas slot machine, right? If you can articulate what you're doing to manage your risk, and that comes from your risk assessments and then your policies and procedures, things like that. If you can articulate to them what you're doing to manage your risk, all of a sudden you slow down the sound of those dollar signs a little bit, but you're also a much more marketable candidate for them. They would much rather take you on than a high dollar candidate because you're a lower risk. They can't make a high risk client pay enough to make it worth it, right? And so, that's a good opportunity to save yourself some money. And the last one here is environmental justice. For a while, it was just the scrap yards were having to deal with environmental justice warriors, right? This isn't good for our community. It's an environmental problem, right? Everybody loves recycling until it's your neighbor kind of thing, right? And we're starting to see more and more of it hitting electronics recyclers as well. And the key to this is really just making sure that you're doing the right thing from an environmental perspective and talking about it within your community. Like, hey, look what we're making this positive impact on with our environmental stuff. We've also taken steps to lower our consumption. We've moved all of our stuff indoors so that there's no opportunity for any hazardous material to flow into into any sort of creeks or watershed or anything like that, water table. And you just make sure that you're talking about it in a positive way. Sell it to anybody that will listen, right? You're putting a lot of money into this, capitalize on it.
Yeah, this is the reason why people, I think, are certified and in this industry to begin with. They're doing good in the community. They're providing good jobs. They're doing electronic collection events in their communities. They're recycling devices, refurbishing devices, getting back into their schools. It's nothing's ever too expensive. It's just undervalued. And
Yep.
for our members to get out there and really talk about it, engage with their community, that's what Tara's also working at doing. It is talking to the marketplace about what a value certification means, why certification matters. It's our hashtag. It's critical, for the long-term success of this industry.
And look, you can make a management system a cost, or you can make it an investment. It depends on how you implement it and how you use it, right? It's like any good tool, right? I've got lots of tools sitting around in my shed that I spent good money on and they haven't paid me back $1. I've also got tools that are invaluable to me and I'd buy them 10 times over, right? And it's the same thing with your management system. If you don't do it right, it is a cost. If you do it right, it's absolutely an investment. And so, going forward on that, it matters. Why does it matter, right? Reputation management. We talked a little bit about this. Word gets out, you're an unsafe facility. Good luck, right? If you're consistently getting, if you're in the refurbishing space and you're consistently getting material sent back, that's no good. And again, we talked about environmental justice. You have the opportunity to tell the story about your business. And once the tide turns to a negative conversation, it's hard to bring it back, right? So just be on the front end of that. And then obviously, there's huge financial impact, increased attention to efficiency and employee retention, insurance. We talked about all this stuff, stronger partnerships with your customers and suppliers. Look, if you are communicating with your customers and suppliers and they're not getting surprised, if you're buying equipment off of a Fortune 100 company or Fortune 500 company, and you're communicating with them about what level of compensation they might get to see for certain equipment and things like that, and they're not getting surprised, and you're proactively providing them with information like disposition reports and things like that, how hard do you think it's going to be for your competitor to walk in there and be like, excuse me, Fortune 100 company, I'd love to take your business, right? It just strengthens your partnerships with both customers and suppliers, and I think it's a really important it's a really important component of what you're doing with that. Yes, the R2 and the e-stewards pieces are immensely valuable in that conversation, particularly around data destruction. But the health and safety, environmental stuff, I mean, ESG is like a thing now, right? And so the more you can talk about that, and really that hits all the components of the management system, I think you're in a better space there. And the last thing, Steve, you hit on it when you said we all want to take care of our employees. It's just the right thing to do, right? If we can eliminate risk to the point to the greatest point possible, I mean, who doesn't want to do that? I mean, when we all lose sleep at night over all sorts of stuff, like you take one of those things off the table, right? If you've got a good system in place and you trust your risk assessments, it just makes it a lot easier to do your day-to-day work.
So for somebody that wants to, there's your contact information,
There
but
you go.
if they're considering they're their ISO 14001, but they're thinking maybe I should look at RIOS, kind of what do you define as kind of your major value differentiator over some of these other options?
Yeah, so there are a couple. One is, the support materials that we've got. I mentioned the implementation guide, which I sort of jokingly refer to as the 10-day MBA for the recycling industry, right? I mean, it's just there's so much information in it. We are coming out, I actually was just in Fort Wayne filming them a couple weeks ago. We're coming out with a series of training videos, just little like 5-minute quick hitters on like the footprint, which is your risk assessment component. So we have all of that stuff that goes with it. When you're certified, you end up on the website, and it sort of highlights your certification. But the big one from a financial perspective is the cost of audit time, right? 45,001 in almost every case has more audit days required than RIOS does. And it's not because it's a more thorough audit or a more effective audit. It's because it's what they set the number at. I mean, small facilities with 20 people are having like 4 or 5 day audits just for 45,001, and you sort of sit there and go like, what questions can you possibly ask for that amount of time, right? So if you're going through a transition to R2v3 or to e-steward, from R2 to e-stewards or e-stewards to R2, or you're just sitting there going, how can I save some money on my certification collection? Ask your certification body to give you a quote for the audit days for RIOS versus the ISO collection. Really that's where it's going to be. And operationally, you're going to look the same. I mean, really the biggest gap in RIOS compared to 1445 and 9 is on contingency. Under 9001, it requires you to have a contingency plan if you're unable to provide material to a downstream supplier. But that doesn't really apply in our industry the way it does in like a manufacturing space or whatever. So otherwise, there are some small changes. We're a little bit more robust in some areas, and we're a little bit less robust in other areas depending on what the industry required. But ultimately, financially, I think you're going to find it to be cheaper to do RIOS, and you get there's a greater level of support on the back. And we also have a really great community. I mean, Amy's our membership manager. Amy and I are always available if you have a question. And if we don't have a good answer for you, we've got 215 facilities at this point that are involved in RIOS, and we know somebody that suffered the same challenges you're going through, and I can connect you with them. So we do have that sort of community feel that, you know, both R2 and eStewards do as well. So.
And I would say, just add to that, that, you know, you're integrated into this community. You're part of trying to make things better,
Yep.
which is a big value. When we go, those that are kind of working together, working positively together, need to support one another. So we
Yeah,
appreciate what you're doing.
you won't see ISO at ERC. I can confidently say that. So.
Well, that leads a segue to our goodbyes. We're at the 2:45 spot, so we're trying to be prompt to get everybody out of here on time. We will
Absolutely.
not be having one of these next month because we're going to be at the e-reuse conference. So
There you go.
I will hope to see our members there, and hopefully potential new members, and then we're going to have a hospitality event there, so all our members can have to mingle. I'm sure you get an opportunity to talk with Daryl in the flesh, and
For better or worse, I'll be there.
and it's Denver, so who doesn't want to go there?
That's right.
So until we meet again, which is look like it's going to be to December, just thank you, and thank you again, Daryl, for being part of this. We really appreciate it, and we'll see y'all very soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Take care, everybody. Bye, Daryl.
Bye.